Yeah,
Hi,
sure.
everyone. It's Nina Collins, and here at the Woolfer, and I'm here today with Terri Francis, the fabulous Terri Francis, who is a Woolfer and an academic. And Terri runs the Black Film Center Archive in Indiana, University of Indiana at Bloomington, and she's worked at Yale and all sorts of places. And she has just published her first book, which is called Josephine Baker's Cinematic Prism. It's gorgeous. We're very proud of her. Hi, Terri. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So before we went live, Terri and I were actually comparing notes about our eyeglasses. And last night I saw Terri on a Zoom and she was wearing a dark purple lipstick that I super envy. So I was asking her permission to copy it. And she's wearing peepers. We're both wearing the same giant peepers. What are they called? They're called, the center stage focus
The
glasses.
center stage. Yeah. Ah, love that name.
I
That's like
know.
that's a life principle. Yes, be center stage.
Exactly. Yes, I'm center stage. And
That's
I
right.
only have them in black and clear. And I think I'm now inspired to get them in red, like Terri, because,
Yeah. Come on.
wow. So, all right, we're about to go down a road of talking about aesthetics, but let's talk about your book because it just came
Sure.
out, and it's a really good moment to publish a book, I would say, about Josephine Baker, right? I mean,
What
is
do
it
you
fair
mean?
to say that there's like, I don't know if the word is renewed or really a first time real interest in Black artists in film? And it's like a moment, I think, in film where there's a lot happening on the Black scene, and so I would think this would be a really good moment. I mean, there's been a lot done on Josephine Baker. Obviously, there have been books written about her, and she wrote a book, right? Didn't she write at least one memoir?
At least one.
Yeah.
The first one was published when she was about 20 or 21. Can you imagine?
Oh, no, I cannot imagine.
It's great. Yeah.
That's crazy because she had quite a life. I mean, in your book, I learned she got married at 14. She grew up in St. Louis. She had a really poor, difficult childhood.
Oh, yeah.
God,
A
she wrote
very, very common one, I think, but very difficult. And then her life is chronicled in a book that her like an estranged husband published based on some notes called Josephine.
I love it. And estranged husband, because by the time we get to this age, it's like one of many. Estranged husbands. Okay, so an estranged husband wrote a book about her. Was it
Yeah. And I thought it was good. I mean, it's supposed to be based on her notes, but I mean, but that's the thing is I always assume that whatever I'm reading about her is mediated.
Mhm.
And I don't know, would you want your ex to write a book about you from notes? It feels like maybe not.
I
So
would not know.
yeah, so like I wouldn't either. I would just take it with a grain of salt or whatever. But there are other books, Jazz Cleopatra, there's The Hungry Heart, there's a Lynn Haney book that the title is escaping me, and then there's some scholarly books as well.
Okay.
Just
You decided, why did you decide to take this on? Like, what was the genesis of this? Because I know you also did your PhD dissertation on her. So you've been working on her for a long time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The dissertation was more of a like African Americans in Paris exploration, especially just like the visual material um that was generated in that moment. But I guess I ended up focused on her, and the way that I focused on her was to focus on her movies.
Mhm.
She has 4 feature films, and each chapter in the book is devoted to one of them. And I did that because although there are these other books about her, there wasn't one that provided an account of her screen labor,
Mhm.
even though that's really the way that we have to engage her now since she's
Yeah,
here.
that's
So
how I think of her. I think of her in the banana dance. I think of her on
yeah,
film. Yeah.
totally. And so it was like, well, let's take a look at that banana dance footage and see what's actually going on and how to contextualize it. And then in addition to focusing on the movies, it was like how to focus on her. There was a lot that, you know, obviously focused on her career in Paris, but I was kind of curious about what happens before Paris. And I wanted to know then about the circulation or the reception of her films in the United States. How was she viewed by other Black intellectuals and creatives? And so the Black press provided a window into that.
That must have been great. And tell us what
Mhm.
you found. What was surprising or what was interesting about it?
I was surprised at how positively and how positively and enthusiastically her early performances were received, and in the US,
Mhm.
and that there was and that it was she was talked about in terms of comedy.
Yeah, I was about to say, why were you surprised? But also, one thing I really didn't know about until I read the book is how much of a physical comedic actress she was. Like
Yeah,
Lucille
totally.
Ball, like a real kind of a funny character. So I'm
Oh
glad.
yeah. I mean, I guess, she probably was always the powerful artistic force that she maintains, all 50 years. But I guess the story about her is that, is that the whole US part is like blank, and then she becomes Josephine Baker in Paris. And what I found was that she became Josephine Baker in the United States,
Mhm.
performing in the Black vaudeville circuit, and that performance is reframed, recontextualized in Paris, and she's on an international stage. When she goes to Paris, she enters into a whole other context in which she is able to become an international star. But she's or maybe star isn't the right word, but an international phenomenon.
Yeah.
um but she Yeah, but she's like, well, there's a great soon to be book about how Black women cannot really ever be stars. Like there's something more complex that's happening in how they're constructed. And so I'll let that scholar tell that story.
All right,
Um,
you got. I mean, Oprah's a star. Halle Berry is a star.
is she though?
Okay, all right, that's
Is,
interesting. They're
is
not
she?
quite allowed to be stars. I guess I mean,
Yeah,
they're always kind of freighted with the Black woman. There's always a weight there. Is that kind of what you mean?
it's more that, well, it's a lack of support, a lot of it. I just published a piece about the romance narratives in Baker's films and the ways that she is at once the star of her movie, but then somehow also just an extra in her own movie. So like
Mhm.
the main plot, the romance plot, just kind of bypasses her in
Uh-huh.
each one of these films, and it was like, she has top billing, and yet the like desire, like the desire, the energy of the movie is actually directed at another actor, her co-star.
Mhm.
And that's just really interesting to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, so that's what I mean, I definitely see her as, you know
Larger
Josephine,
than life.
yes, larger than life Josephine Baker. But these movies built upon her persona and her fame, I think also undermined her in
Well, she
important
didn't.
ways.
She didn't like the movies, is my understanding from the book, right? I mean, they
No,
were.
she didn't.
Yeah.
She didn't. She was like, kind of excited to get into it, and then she ended up finding them cold, and it was like, well, of course you did. You weren't being treated right.
Hmm. And
Mhm,
was that because, I mean, they were all white filmmakers, I assume,
mhm.
right?
I mean, yeah, yes, and I think probably they couldn't, they really just couldn't imagine her being the center,
How
the
to make her
rebellious one.
truly the center. Right.
Yeah.
Well, there was also the context that you talk about in the book about the human zoos, which I don't
Um,
know if our listeners know what those are, but maybe you want to talk a little bit about that because it is really interesting, right? She became this incredible sexual figure, funny figure. She's very beautiful. Um, but it was also in the context of 1920s Europe and the relationship to Africa. And yeah.
yeah, like a colonizing relationship in which, the what's happening in Paris is weird and very
Yeah,
messy.
really, really weird.
Yeah, yeah,
Fetishization, the display of Black bodies.
absolutely. Yeah. So like on the one hand, there are these displays that are referred to as human zoos where people from African countries are being brought into Paris. And right in that garden in front of the Eiffel Tower, I can't remember what it's called now, but that whole park is where one of these zoos was set up. And it was just like a diorama. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
but it was a living diorama where these people were there to just
Be looked at to show their
yeah,
physique and show who they were. And
yeah. I mean, they were like it was like everyday life. Like it would be set up like a sort of a villagey thing, and then and people would just watch them throw coins or whatever. And so that's going on. The Colonial Exposition is happening. American jazz musicians are having their moment in Paris as well. And so there are a number of
yeah,
different Parises that are happening at the same time. And Baker, bless her, I mean, she just like kind of become that.
we talked about how she bought a castle right in the south of France.
She
And
certainly did.
she adopted 12 children. And so she had this really, and there's a wonderful photograph of her in the book that I really love, of her older, kind of, she looks like she's in her 50s and she's wearing a sweater and she's got glasses on. And she looks like a very lovely, content woman who had a really nice life. And it's early in the book and it makes you feel really good um, about her, because she was obviously working in a really weird, as you said, like weird moment, and she was
Oh
being
yeah.
used in a weird way, but she seems to have kind of made it work for her. Like she seems to have been aware of what was going on and made it work for her.
Yeah, I think she was aware enough. It's difficult as it is for
Any
me,
of
for
us,
anyone,
right,
yeah, to
in the context
fully.
of history. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think one of the things I think really served her is that she was a very hard worker, and she studied what other people were doing. She studied what she was doing, and she just wanted to perform. And I've heard her talk in interviews later in life, these when she's in her 50s, early 60s, about that commitment to life in the theater. So like for her, that's what she's focused on. There's all this stuff that's happening out here, and but that's what her interest is. There are also moments, there's quotations that I saw in various places and synthesized for the book, where she does show an awareness of her own performance. And that so for example, when she uh, takes the role in Siren of the Tropics and they begin filming, she's dismayed that she's really just going to be doing the same thing that she did on stage. She wants to do something different. She's a discerning person and is aware of moving images. And I really tried to foreground those kinds of moments of reflection in the
Nice.
book.
That makes me wonder, like for you as a Black woman and an academic, I mean, you've now been working on her for over 20 years, right? At least.
Oh,
So,
goodness, yeah.
so what has that journey been for you? Like in thinking about how to present her life, and I don't know, I would just imagine there's been a lot of phases for you about what she's meant to you personally. And
Oh, sure.
because as you grow up, your perspective changes.
Oh yeah, now she's my favorite person, and I totally get it. And I'm sort of like, girl, I feel you. It's the, I might, I don't see how we could escape exploitation. We can't fully control our image, and yet we decide what to do with our time. And you have to know your talent and your purpose. But that took a really long time. I mean, a big moment was switching from framing the book with France to framing the book with not just the US, but the Black press. That
Okay.
shifted my focus to what do our people say? Like, what do we see? And I mean, and people see a lot of different things. Lots of excitement about Baker's as a potential movie star, and some really good analysis of these films when they do arrive, and how they're not excited, they're not happy.
They're not that great, right?
Yeah, because she's playing characters that are servile. Like when critics said, this she's in the arms of this other character, this French guy, white guy, or whatever, but it's like she flung herself there. He's not even trying. and and
She
and
looks
there
so desperate.
yeah, and that really bothered them. Like, why is she being so servile? She's Josephine Baker. So, yeah, so I was glad that I was able to join that conversation.
To add to that voice of like what's happening here.
Exactly, a critical tradition. Yeah.
Yeah. Was she ever in Hollywood, or considered like a Hollywood actress? And how does she hold up in the context of people like Dorothy Dandridge, or I'm trying to think who would be her generation. Hattie McDaniel was older, no, younger.
Yeah, well, Baker's career was 50 years, so all of these people
came and went in her
trajectory. But so the first film is 1927, and the early anticipation of that film is that she could be the Hollywood star we've all been waiting for.
Okay.
Another nice star is Nina Mae McKinney.
I don't know her. Nina Mae McKinney? Cool.
Yeah, I always say Nina. Maybe it is Nina, actually. I don't know. It's like you read things and you're like, I've never said her name out loud before. But in my head, I've been saying Nina Mae McKinney. But she performed in Hallelujah in, I want to say it was 1929 or 1930, which is a King Vidor film. And she plays like a temptress sort of figure. Very saucy and interesting. And I would have thought she would have been, the first star, but she only appeared in a couple of films, and then the other one was with Paul Robeson. So she wasn't, a small fry.
Yeah.
But so that's one person. Ethel Waters is an important corollary with Baker, in that she's a little bit older, but but Baker took her place in the show in Paris. Ethel Waters was offered the part, and she just didn't go, and Baker seized that opportunity. So there's but there's actually 2 film contexts for Baker, or maybe 3, in the 20s and 30s. One is the Hollywood scene that's emerging, and the other one is independent race films. Your Oscar Michaud and all those early filmmakers, and what they were doing with actresses and with narrative and entertainment, at the time. And then there's the colonial cinema that emerges in France. So she's kind of, the films that she performed in are kind of relevant to these three areas at the same time. And I became interested in what these French kind of colonial era productions could mean to a Black American cinema here.
Right. Yeah, I thought they were all made actually in France. I didn't realize that. But so she also spent time in LA?
No, I don't think she spent time in LA. I think they are French productions. They were filmed in France and in North Africa. Princess Tam Tam was filmed in North Africa, but they are screened in the US and discussed in the US. And so they end up having a relevance circulating with with Oscar Michaud stuff, or just with the idea, the desire.
Like when I think of like Dorothy Dandridge, I think of like a Lana Turner, like a Black Lana Turner, right? Someone in a glamorous studio system. But when I think of Josephine Baker, I don't. I think of her being in France and kind of coming out of the, as you said, the vaudeville world and the Showtime world.
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting with these performers. Like Dorothy Dandridge is a little bit later, but I think Miss Dandridge did want to be in Hollywood, and there's Lena Horne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I Googled to try and think, was there anyone I wasn't, like there's Cicely Tyson. Like if you look at
Sure.
big Black stars, of history, you don't get very many, needless to say. If you Google it, you end up getting also people like Halle Berry. You get like 10 names.
Yep.
Really not a lot. Josephine Baker is always there. Dorothy Dandridge is always there. Cicely Tyson. They all come from different. They feel. I mean, Josephine Baker certainly feels unique because of her French history, but she was, very much American. So it's cool that you decided to look at how Americans look at her, how Black Americans look at her.
I kind of I wanted to just think about that, and and it's also about where I wanted to situate myself intellectually, and maybe even emotionally. I don't know. It was just like it was an important decision to shift that framework, because it's also about archives. Do I want to return to France, or do I want to, do work on this book here in the US? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Make that stop.
Very cool. She also had a pet cheetah. Josephine Baker did, which I think is super cool. And I guess, one of the things I was also interested in when you talk about, I guess until I read this book and talked to you about her, I did feel a little bit like Josephine Baker had been victimized. There was a little bit of a sense in my imagination of kind of that she was used and objectified in a way that was kind of gross. But I feel more, having spoken to you and read the book, that she really was a more empowered figure in many ways. And I just kind of wonder what that was like for you emotionally. Like,
I think that's part of also me getting older while writing the book. I think that she was not exploited and not objectified, but I was interested in it was just weird. Like I'm going to look at her movies, and then I would like to know what she said about these movies. And like once you start,
sorry to interrupt, but some of it's also just personality. Like I think about Nina Simone, who was such a complicated, dramatic, tortured figure, right? And she was such a superstar, and also spent a lot of time in Europe. But she was pissed off and really tortured, right? And it sounds like, at least I get the impression from that pretty picture of Josephine Baker, where she looks like someone I want to hang out with, but she just wasn't as tortured a person, is my sense. But I don't know.
But that's where like my book is so much about her screen labor and I'm offering this theory of an optimistic one about the interaction of her images as a mode of what I think I call a fractured authorship. And I'm just going to call that she had the authority in her films, even if she wasn't completely she's not the director. She's not she didn't write the screenplay, but she's the reason these films exist. She's the driving force. And that's something. That's a kind of power, and and I want to make something of that. I recall that like this thinking of her as more of a symptom of colonialism. And I think that that's probably true.
Sure, to some extent. Of course.
But I also think that within that with the messiness and is like, well, if let's look at the work that she did do. Let's look at the nature of authorship. And I think as I got older, and I'm trying to establish my authorship through writing about her, and I'm just like, I'm not going to be doing that on the back of someone else's victimhood. That just feels not good.
You
know what I mean? How would I like, how would I be excited about? I don't know. I just couldn't.
Absolutely. No, that's what I was kind of interested in. It's a complicated question, but it seems like, I mean, I have a good feeling about it. It feels like the whole thing, I don't know. I feel like I've learned about Josephine Baker and I feel good about her life
Mhm.
because of the work
Yeah.
you've done, which is really nice.
Yeah, I learned how to think about her through seeing the performers who engaged her,
Mhm.
whether it was an actress, or whether it was an opera singer, whether it was Beyonce. It was like, well, what do they see in
Mhm.
her?
Right.
You
Right.
know, because that's really something when you decide to lend your body to the words and the movements of other people, and it's not like an imitation, and it's not like like kind of minstrel time. It's really like an engagement and this reflection. Well, they must be seeing something that we need to see, and I really wanted to understand that and follow their lead. So a lot of my work, it's just like describing her movements, and just like pausing the video of like,
Yeah.
okay, this is these bent knees, these arms, this pacing, these references, this setting, and just really thinking it through very carefully. And you know the thing that we don't do enough of with creative people, and Bridget Cook talks about this in a recent article, is we don't think about them as world makers. We see them as products that entertain us,
Mhm.
and or that represent what we want. Like, you need to represent transcending racism, or you need to
Mhm.
represent whatever. And it's like, well, Josephine Baker is doing things that I cannot do, most people cannot do.
Right.
And so I'm interested in what she's thinking about, and what world does she make with her gestures, her thinking, her expression.
Mhm.
And it's it and it's fun. It's hard in a way for me, because all through graduate school you're trying to prove like you're critical.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I don't want to write a biography. I don't want to be too celebratory. I don't want to be naive.
Mhm.
But at a certain point, I found my faith in this person as a
Mhm.
maker of knowledge. And I realized the stakes for me, of figuring out how to write about her, what questions had not yet been asked, like, what knowledge does she produce? No one has
Mhm.
asked this question.
Mhm.
um and what does she look like to her peers? And I am, in a way, a peer. And
Yeah.
when I look at her, I see someone very interesting
Yeah.
and very compelling. And I and I'm gonna go with that. It's a theory and a
Mhm.
concept, and that's also difficult, because then I have to see myself as someone who's
Yeah.
able to theorize, and you just take a chance.
Right. Right. To really put yourself out there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, here I am.
Here you are, your first published book. And I know you have another one under contract, right? Don't you have a book with Routledge coming up?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Afro-surrealism in film and video.
Nice. Good title.
I'm very
All
excited.
right. Well, I love you. I love your work. This is awesome.
Same.
Next time we do this, we'll both be wearing red glasses and purple lipstick.
Yes, 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 yes.
All right. Enjoy your weekend, sweetie. Thank you so much for talking to us about this book. So, everyone, it's Josephine Baker's Cinematic Prism. It's
Oh no,
just
where's
out.
my coffee? Oh.
I've got my copy right here. Very fabulous.
Thank you, Nina.
All right. Bye, honey.
Bye.
See you later.